Oh, thanks so much for having me, LA.
So, Cassandra, I've been reading about you all over the news. You have an amazing story. You were completely up to your head in debt, and somehow you managed to pay it all off, and then you started helping other people get out of debt. So, this is a story that I'm eager to listen how you did it. But in addition to that, you have an alternative life. You are like one of those superheroes that during daytime do one thing and then in the evening time or nighttime do another one. So in addition to all this, you are also a musician. So I also have plenty of questions to do that. So yeah, thank you for joining us one more time. Can we start by you telling us a little bit about your background story? What do you study? Where do you grow up? I know that you are an immigrant twice. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I was born in Trinidad, which is the last island in the chain of the Caribbean, right before Venezuela. We're about 14 nautical miles north west of Venezuela, if I remember my geography. And my mother and I immigrated to Montreal when I was 6 years old.
Nice.
So she didn't know anybody. She traveled before me 3 years in advance to kind of pave the way, and came back for me, and we immigrated to Montreal together. And I learned French literally on the fly. No one in my family spoke French, so I attended French immersion and self-taught essentially, right? And I was a quick study in music. So like how the music came into play is that I come from a Indian family. My mother is Hindu background and my father is mixed. He was. And so I grew up listening to a lot of Hindi records and religious records. So I was at a very young age able to literally note for note, perfect pitch, sing to the records. And my mother was just amazed. So she quickly, when we immigrated to Montreal, quickly, put me in the conservatory for music. I was studying as much music as I possibly could. I was also singing in choirs, and it was just my life was full of music. And so grew up in Montreal. I lived most of my life in Montreal, over 30 years to be precise, and studied at Lindsay Place High School, did a lot of band competitions. I graduated with honors in music and then went on to Vanier College, stayed at Vanier. Dropped out of college because I wanted to earn more money. Because again, growing up with a single parent who had to work multiple jobs to make ends meet, my mom never made more than $25,000 Canadian in her lifetime. So I guess someone who hears that, you're wondering, how do you live on that? Well, inflation, that would be maybe $17,000 in today's dollars. So it's even worse. So I had to grow up really quickly in order to be able to be there emotionally to support my mom because she had no one else to really rely on. So that fed into my desire of wanting things because I grew up with not having everything I wanted. We had everything that we needed for sure. I never missed out on food, clothing, shelter, all the essentials. But, you know, if I wanted to get my driver's license, my mother was not paying for it. I had to go work my paper route literally at 14 years old and save up money for my first Nintendo and pay for my license. Donc, I had to really understand early on that if I wanted something, it was up to me to get it. So that fed my desire of quitting college, and I even studied at Concordia University in psychology and dropped that too because the allure of a steady paycheck was just too much for me to
Right.
ignore. But that also began my journey in debt. So all through my 20s, I slowly and consistently amassed. By the time I hit my early 30s, it was $55,000 worth of consumer debt. And that was mainly spread out over credit cards, car loan, a business loan that went bad. So all that combined, and at the time I was making, if $45,000 Canadian as a credit analyst, which was okay, it's respectable, but still, I owe more than I make. So we already have an issue, right? And you would think that as a corporate credit analyst, I should be excellent at managing my personal finances. But that's one of the things that I teach people is that is so far from the truth. That just because you may work in a finance area or a business career, that doesn't mean that you have the understanding to manage your personal money. So I really didn't. And long story short, in 2009, I wanted to have my credit limits increased. And when they did the verification, my income wouldn't support the credit increased. So I that's when it hit home for me that I was in a financial situation that I could no longer support, or that I was at risk of missing a payment. So that's when I realized that I had to do something about it. And so I did multiple things, but one of the key things that helped me to pay this debt off and stay debt free, because I've never gone back into debt since then, which is, that's a feat in of itself, because a lot of people, fall back into debt. One of the things was to deal with my emotions around money, spending to validate my self-esteem. I had a huge issue with self-esteem and wanting to show others and reflect to the world that I was successful. And I did that through purchasing. So I had to rewire my brain as to separate my personal value, my self-esteem, from earning, from money, and realize that I was hurting myself financially as a result. So that was one thing that I really, really had to work on, was the mindset shift. And then I used a bunch of strategies, which is, maybe you've heard about the debt snowball and the debt avalanche. So I kind of came up with my own combination of that. The first debt I paid off was really an easy one. It was just like a quick win. It was maybe like $500 or something, and I paid that off quick. And then I shifted and said, I need to pay the highest interest off first, because especially with the bigger balances. So I did that. I, at the time, was still modeling as a commercial model. I was appearing in some movies. So I was earning all this extra side hustle income. I was singing back vocals for a lot of local singers and also international singers that were appearing at like Les Francophonies and the Jazz Fest. So I was earning extra cash. So I diverted all that extra cash to paying my debt over and above the minimum. And I think one of the single biggest things that I did was I gave up my 2-bedroom condo. I had this gorgeous 2-bedroom condo, and I decided to move in as a roommate for the first year of my debt payment. So I slashed my living expenses by at least 50%, if not more. So all of these came together like over time, and I was able to, and then I also negotiated increases at work. I read a book called The Secrets of Six-Figure Woman by Barbara Stanny, to help under earners like myself, especially of color, Black and brown women, to stop undervaluing yourself in the professional space and command more, and be able to justify that to your employers. So when I started learning those skills, I started negotiating year over year, like 10% increases. So all of this combined, it wasn't just one single thing. It was many things that I tried and learned to be able to reach $55,000 debt-free in 3.5 years.
Wow. Okay, so that's an amazing story. When you first started working, when you were living with your mom and you were struggling, what kind of work were you doing?
So I started off, I think, so my first job, I remember at 16, it was part-time. I was working at the counter at Femme à Prix. I was the makeup counter, but my first real, I would say, full-time job, I was 20 or 21, and ClearNet. I don't know if you remember the days of ClearNet before it became TELUS. So TELUS bought ClearNet, but ClearNet opened their call center in Montreal, their first call center in Montreal, and I was one of 22 people hired to start off the call center. So I started making $32,000 plus bonus at 22. So, for someone like me who came from a very humble background, earning that kind of money, I was like, okay, this is great. I had a brand new Pontiac Sunfire lease. Like, I thought I was special, but I had a lot to learn, financially speaking, that.
And you told me, you just mentioned that you were earning, without finishing your college education, $55,000 a year. That's quite good. A lot of people with college education, they don't earn that.
Yeah. And well, I'll jump forward to now, where I earn about well, Canadian dollars. I don't mind talking about money. I earn 130K US base salary now, without bonus, without anything else, without stock options. So I have no college degree. I am technically a high school, that's my degree. And I've been able to successfully advocate for myself in the marketplace, and also, get the certifications that I needed to be able to command that kind of money. So it's not impossible. It's not easy. I'm not going to pretend it was easy, but I just took advantage of certain opportunities that I saw at work that no one else was really going after. And in particular, my employer back in Montreal convinced my boss to send me to a IT boot camp to get me certified in a skill set that they needed, but nobody wanted to take. From that moment on, my life changed from a professional point of view. I never looked back.
Okay, and a lot of people have that emotional uh, impediment to go forward. They think money is evil. I don't deserve this. Especially women, and especially women of color, they have all these barriers along the way. So you say that you work with the your emotional relationship with money. Can you give us more details about that?
Sure. So as I spoke about before, I had a real issue with self-esteem just based on, the environment that I grew up in, seeing my mother really have to struggle to make sure that we were okay. And also from a cultural perspective, and systemic perspective, people of color are already starting behind the eight ball. We're
Right.
already disadvantaged especially from a systemic perspective. So worse yet, I didn't graduate university. I didn't graduate college. I had created barriers, and then there were barriers created for me, right? So I was competing with two sets of issues. And then in Montreal specifically, it's rare that you would see a Black English person succeeding in Montreal in terms of having a decent job, right? Because you needed to be bilingual. So many English speaking Black people in Montreal really were at a detriment in the times that I were growing up, and probably still now, because if you do not speak the official languages, you're not really getting those plum jobs, the government jobs, the high end private corp jobs. So I had to really reconcile that. I know this is what I'm facing as disadvantages, but I have access to information. I have access to knowledge, and I had access to certain people, certain mentors who were white, who believed in me. Like, you can't do this alone. It's
Right.
not impossible, but I firmly believe that it's just like regular common day situation with protesting in the United States. We Black people cannot change our current situation by ourselves. We need allies. So I had allies who were able to advocate and literally fight for me to get the job that I wanted. That changed my life. So there's a lot of things. This could probably be a 2-hour conversation, but in short, I didn't do it alone, but I also committed to doing the work that I needed to do in order to get me where I am today. I didn't just take it lying down.
So as I'm looking at your website, I see certified project manager, certified credit analyst, certified financial education instructor. So that means that after your job, whatever that was at the moment, you just didn't go home and buy a 6 pack of beer and watch TV, or maybe like now it's legal, smoke a joint. From what I see here, you went home and you started working on yourself, and this is a big problem that we like to blame the government, the system, everybody else, but we do that while watching Netflix, while drinking our beer, while doing something else. So but you have that desire to say, okay, I don't want to be stuck here. I want to have another promotion, another salary increase. So I'm going to sit down and do my homework. So can you tell us a little bit about that process of after a hard day of work, going home and opening your textbooks or whatever is it that you had to do in order to earn all these credentials?
So I think it's in the world of project management and program management, it's all about creating a plan, right? You know what your end goal is, but you've got to reverse engineer how you're going to get to Z, right? So you're starting at A, you need to end at Z, but what is everything that needs to happen in consequence and in tandem and or in parallel to get you there? So I just used that common sense logic that I just needed to map out. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew where I wanted to go. I knew how much I wanted to make. So what do I need to do to get there? So that was a lot of the time is spent really mapping it out and planning it out and visualizing that, okay, I need to be doing X, Y, and Z. I need to be doing it 3 times a week, or I need to be doing it every day. It's no different than being a musician. You constantly need to be refining your skill and practicing. You can't take it for granted that you're talented and then just sit back and just expect to remain talented, especially if you're competing in the market where you've got millions of other people who are just as talented, if not more so. So for me, I was always, it's like an inner competition. I don't care about what anybody else is doing. I care about c'est quoi mon rendement? What is my output? Because it's my output that will likely determine if I'm going to make my goals or not. So I've always had that inner drive that many people just don't. And it's something you can learn because it's not like I was always that way. But I think from a young age, I was probably pretty good, with just knowing what I wanted to do or knowing what I wanted to be, and just going for it. Worst is what can happen. It doesn't work out. That's the worst that can happen. And then you learn to pivot into something else that does work.
Right. And what would you say to the hundreds or millions of people who are in a job and yet they lack that motivation? They are waiting until Trump helps them or Biden helps them or somebody, give them the magic key to have everyone in the middle class, as maybe we were in the 50s, that everyone had a car, a house with the fence, picket fences, and everyone was in more or less in equal footing. And it seems like many people are waiting until those times come back, and that there is some, I don't know, kind of income equality. And meanwhile, while that happened, while Trump help us or Biden help us, we just sit down and wait.
So you can't afford to wait on anybody. Like, you have to save yourself. Like, I'm of the mentality that, whatever the government provides, utilize whatever access you've been given up to now, but don't expect that that will continue. Don't, if I'm one of those people that I'm more of a pessimist. Things are going to change. It may not change in your favor. So what can you control today? What is in your world, environment, access that you can use and control to your advantage? That's why I encourage many people to not just rely on one source of income. Create multiple streams of income, because if one gets taken away, like the music world, like COVID, what are you going to do? So at the end of the day, it's you have to have some self-responsibility. You have to have some personal accountability. And expecting that the government is going to be always there for you, that a company will always be there for you, is very short-sighted. People are learning the hard way. In the United States, we have 50 million Americans out of work. That's not going to change anytime soon. So a lot more people are now becoming entrepreneurs out of necessity, whereas us entrepreneurs who started years ago, we are more comfortable because we did that heavy lifting. We saw the future coming. Right? You have to look forward, so it's a different mindset. It's really about how you perceive yourself and how you see the world and how it's changing. You need to be able to keep up with the world because it's constantly evolving and changing.
So, what do you suggest? Constantly educating yourself to see what's because I have I have a way of thinking. Let's say that today, due to hardship and bad circumstances, you are a cashier at Walmart, okay? And that's the best you can do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if 5 years from now you're still a cashier in Walmart, as much as we would like to blame Walmart for lack of opportunity, I think there is a shared responsibility over there. Like if I'm a cashier at Walmart, I could take some evening classes to see how I can be a manager or assistant manager or whatever. So yeah, I believe that education, self-education, or that initiative that you took to get all these other certifications is essential in order for us to get out of difficult economic conditions.
I agree to a large extent. I think it's first understanding who you are as an individual and deciding. You have to make a very conscious choice that if you're not satisfied with your current status quo, what are you willing to do to
Mhm.
change said status quo? What are you willing to commit to? Are you willing to commit to the extra nights working till midnight? Are you willing to work weekends? Are you willing to not necessarily go hang out with your friends all the time? Because it's going to require certain sacrifices on your part. Then the other side of the coin, which is it also requires a little bit of luck.
Mm,
Okay, a
yeah,
little bit of, luck meets opportunity meets preparation, right? You have to be ready to be able to see an opportunity that is literally like coming your way. And as I said before, don't be closed in. Reach out to other entrepreneurs or reach out to other people who are in the space that you're looking to get into. Start connecting. As I said, you cannot do this alone,
right,
right?
right.
So it really requires a myriad of things that have to happen. But without you, the individual, making that consistent commitment to change and to growth, the rest is moot.
Okay, so you got out of debt, you had all this debt. Can you just give us a few tips on how somebody who was in a similar situation, I mean, you started paying out your credit cards, you did the easy ones first, and then you started paying out the ones, but just to get out of this hole on the ground, can you give us some tips to, yeah,
Sure. I think it depends what type of hole you've dug yourself into,
right.
right? So it's not, a lot of people will not encourage what I'm about to say, but sometimes if after you really honestly look at your situation, that let's say you have $50,000 of debt, you're not working, you don't foresee an income coming in soon, realistically, how are you paying that? You
Right.
may need to consider bankruptcy. And it's something that many experts don't talk about. But I really like to encourage people to do a holistic assessment with a professional who can help them to make the best decision long term, not short term. Because look, in the United States, a lot of people are suffering massive debt because of medical debt, not because
Mhm.
of being irresponsible, but because they lost their job, they lost their home, they had cancer. It's hard to come back financially from those
Right.
types of setbacks. So sometimes you need a fresh start. So that's one thing I don't encourage it, but I would say don't close your eyes to all of the options you have in front of you and choose the one that really makes the most sense. For the short term, for those of us who do have an income and who have just been irresponsible with their money, you have to first understand what's coming in and where is it going out. And you can't do that with just trying to track your spending for a week. You really need to track your spending for at least 2 to 3 months, because sometimes you have the one-off bills, like a car renewal registration that happens once a year, 350 something dollars. Quebec decides to charge you for registering your car. Have you broken that down into what that cost every month? So you can build a realistic monthly budget and not just your regular, Hydro-Québec and Bell telephone bill. Those are regulars, those are constants, but you have a lot of bills that you don't realize that are not constant. What about your tax bill every year? Most of us owe tax, but you don't plan for it. So before you start trying to dig out of debt, first understand where you're at today. Understand your spending, understand what's driving your spending from an emotional perspective. Do you spend when you are unhappy? Do you
Mhm.
spend when you've been in a really difficult situation, relationship, whether it's parent, whether it's a partner? What motivates you to spend? And then the other thing is that realign your spending according to what matters to you. So for example, I don't really spend on subscriptions. I spend a lot on travel because my family is so spread apart, right? I take care of my elderly mother who's in Montreal. I'm in Montreal now. I'll be in Montreal every 3 months, 2 to 3 months. That costs money, but that is a priority for me. So where I constant, again, the word conscious, I consciously choose where to direct my dollars. And if you still realize that you still make less than what you're spending, then you have some hard choices to make. Either you earn more, you spend less, and in my case, I did both. That's the real thing. You have to find a way to earn more and also find a way to keep your spending low.
Okay, so can you, so you negotiated your salary several times. Can you give us some tips on how we can go around and say, hey, boss, I think I deserve more because X?
Okay, so that's the word. I think. You can't think. I know I deserve more because I have been keeping track of everything I have been doing over the past year. And I can quantify what I've been doing, how it relates to profit in your company, or how it relates to saving X amount of dollars in your company. Like, for example, I created a new business process that identified gaps that created a result that we're spending $300,000 in excess of what we should. That's what I mean, is by being able to substantiate your
Right.
value. So that's what a lot of people don't do, is they don't really take very detailed notes about their contributions, right? Then you have to go to the marketplace and see where do you fall in terms of a salary range. Did you poorly negotiate when you first took your job, so you ended up on the low end of the range, right? So there's a lot of things that you need to consider, but namely, advocate for yourself, be able to feel the fear of having that discussion with your manager, but you've got the proof to back it up. And if they don't agree to your request for a 5% or 10% raise, well, then that what, you've done all that you can, and you may need to look elsewhere.
Mm.
And to be honest, the most raises that you will get is moving from one job to another. You'll never see the kind of raise, like a 20% or a 30% raise, that I've seen in my career by staying at your same employer. Very rare. It's
So that's
usually,
something that you are okay to be willing to just say, okay, if I don't get this, then start looking, not put it as an ultimatum, but already putting your
well, the thing,
radars.
yeah, I wouldn't announce to my boss that I'm planning to leave, but I would definitely be putting feelers out to understand, well, what is my real value in the marketplace based on all that I can do, right? But then there's the flip side. There is, sometimes it's not all about the money, right?
Mm.
So in my case, I was very specific on, I wanted to work for an employer who gave me the flexibility to work remotely, because I need to be able to move back and forth from Canada to the US at will, right? Without losing income. Sometimes vacation time matters to you, right? Because you're a caregiver at home, or so it's not tangible values, tangible payments that matter. It's the intangible,
Right.
benefits that sometimes will add up to you wanting to stay because it meets your needs at that very time. So I don't want to also always encourage people, okay, it's all about the money, it's all about the money. You have to look at your personal situation and take into consideration what meets your needs at that point in time.
Okay, so we spoke about reducing debt. We spoke about increasing your salary. Now, hopefully, you pay all your debt, and now you have some investment money. What do you do with that investment money if you have some?
So it really depends on your priority. So I am not a fiduciary. I cannot give you explicit advice at what to invest your money in. That would be irresponsible of me. What I would first encourage you to do is, if you don't have an emergency savings fund,
Mm.
you that don't even invest right now. I think our current times are teaching us that not having a 3 to 6 month necessity spending account, emergency fund, has been devastating to so many. Even if you were eligible for CERB or unemployment, look how long it took before you got that first check. Some people are still waiting, you know so imagine if you don't have a couple $1,000 or $10,000 set aside. I think that's one of the first priorities people should make, is to ensure that you have money for a rainy day. Then from there, you can determine, based on, again, I always encourage people to use a financial consultant that is not tied to a particular company or fund, meaning that they're fiduciary. And that what I mean by that is that they are not profiting from selling you a specific fund. They
Right.
are charging you a flat fee, holistically looking at your situation and being able to give you advice that is beneficial to you, not to them. So people are like, oh, well, I don't want to spend the money. I go, especially if you are not an experienced investor, you don't know the difference between an EFT and an index fund. You don't know, how much interest rate that you're getting on a certain product. That means that you're financially illiterate. And until you become literate, trust someone who has done that job and who is certified to help guide you and teach you. That is my honest opinion on that.
Okay, so the person who is charging you a commission for their advice, but they don't charge you anything upfront, that's the kind of person that you should avoid.
So what I mean is, so for example, if you come to me and you want me to give you a holistic plan in terms of investing, I'm going to charge you a flat fee.
Right, right,
I'm not charging a percentage off
right.
of your investments. Flat
This
fee.
is crazy. Let's say, let's say you are an accountant and you would charge me money, my fee, my to do my taxes according to how much money I earn. That would be crazy. Oh, so you are a millionaire? I'm gonna charge you more. And Joe Blow here, he doesn't have much money. I'm going to charge him less. So for the same work, it doesn't make sense. But that's the way it works in, let's say, commission-based financial service. They charge you what is it, 2-3% for their service,
Exactly.
and instead of like, here we spoke for 2 hours, 3 hours. This is my hourly rate, and it's gonna cost you, I don't know, let's say $500, and that's it.
Right.
Not a percentage of your $1 million
Right.
assets. It's just, this is the work. It takes the same amount of effort to buy 50 stocks as 5,000 stocks. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think who the highly active managed funds are is if you are in multimillionaire status territory, right? That you're using sophisticated process. Like this is beyond the average Joe and Jill. Like we don't need that, right?
Right.
We're starting out with $50 or $100 a month or $500 a month. We're not ready for that kind of
Right.
level. So you don't want to have fees eat into the amount of money you already have to work with, which is not a lot, right? So we've got to be smart with how we invest and who we use to help us invest.
Okay, well, Cassandra, to close it off, can you tell us a little bit about your music career?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So like I said, started as a musician when I was like 6 years old. So I started singing and songwriting as a solo artist, probably like in my 20s, mid to late 20s. And I released an album in 2011 called Road to Rebellion. So that was a more pop urban type of album. And right now I'm actually in the process of recording some new music, which is more world beat, which is more Afro-centric, and from the Caribbean as well, because I have like a huge mixture. So definitely completely different from the first album. And right now just in mixing stage with the first single. So lots to come. So yeah, if you follow me on my website or on Twitter, you'll hear about it as it comes to.
Well, when I publish the show notes, I will put a link to your music so the listeners can go out and check it out.
Sure.
Cassandra, this has been amazing. Can you tell us one more time your website? Where can people find you? Your Twitter
Yeah.
handle, all that?
Sure. So on Twitter and Instagram, my handle is at Kassandra Dasent. My website is kassandradasent.com. And yeah, you can find me there. And I'm pretty interactive. So if you have questions about music, money, and anything else, I'm pretty open. I think Alain can attest to that. I respond to people pretty well.
Cassandra, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.